Welcome to the Untitled Cafe and my ongoing chapter-by-chapter synopsis of James Joyce's phenomenal New Age classic Ulysses. Now, wow, New Age classic I hear you say? Never heard it described as such, and I'll only answer, okay, early New Age classic. Well, here we are at episode 8, another fairly straightforward one, only 33 or 4 pages long. It's the lunch hour, between 1 and 2, and much of Bloom's thoughts will revolve around food, sustenance, lunch, and his wife Molly, at home and expecting a visit by her concert tour promoter and soon-to-be lover, Blazes Boylan. Looking back, we've had the first 3 chapters devoted to the young artist shaman, Joyce alter ego Stephen Dedalus, the next 3 to the 38-year-old Leopold Bloom, and the 7th to both when our 2 heroes first crossed paths. That last one began from the perspective of Bloom and ended from Stephen's, and from a sort of news and exchange of ideas psycho-spiritual viewpoint definitely reflected the male end of the spectrum. Here in 8, we're firmly back in Bloom's corner, and yet at the same time, focusing again on hunger, food, sustenance, and the body, the psycho-spiritual pendulum has swung back into the realm of the female, you might say. Here are Bloom's thoughts, contemplating the silent veining of an oaken bar counterslab. He thinks, it curves. Curves are beauty, shapely goddesses. Venus, Juno, curves the world admires. And then he goes on, lovely forms of women, sculpted Junonian, immortal, lovely, and we stuffing food in one hole and out behind. Food, chyle, blood, dung, earth, food, have to feed it like stoking an engine. Ah, the stream of life, as Bloom puts it. Food, chyle, blood, dung, earth, food. Hardly the thoughts of an ordinary everyman, as a great many readers and teachers of Joyce and Ulysses would depict him. Anyway, and by the way, I'm determined to limit the number of times I employ that expression. Another notion I brought forth in my last video was that one of the genuine central themes of the book is that Stephen / the young James Joyce is moving inexorably towards a symbolic death at the hands of a British soldier and rebirth alongside the caring solicitude of Bloom. That is, a psycho-spiritual death and resurrection, a leaving behind of old ways, old patterns of thought and belief, and a birth into a new relationship with the self and the world. As an aside, in my last video I also mentioned a documentary I watched on Netflix titled The Last Shaman, wherein a young all-American man, student of one of the most prestigious and exclusive universities in the country, falls into a profound soul-crushing depression. On a quest for healing in the jungles of Peru, he encounters a number of ayahuasca shaman practitioners, the last and most effective of which actually enacts a symbolic death, burial, and unearthing resurrection on the young questing hero. Watch that film, folks, because that is precisely the trajectory Stephen Dedalus is on in Ulysses. Nothing in staid old Dublin moves him anymore. Everything he has been taught and brought up to, all its values, sentiments, mores and customs, including even what he has been taught concerning art and poetry, leave him cold, depressed, and utterly disengaged. On the subject of Stephen, in my 6 tips for reading Ulysses video, I advise not focusing on what Stephen has rejected, abandoned, or left behind, but what he is struggling to move towards. For me, at any rate, it's in contemplating where Stephen is struggling in his soul to move towards that the true significance, the true heroism of Bloom begins to be revealed. Okay, so that being said, let's get back to episode 8 and Bloom, his business in the Freeman's Journal done, walking the streets once more. It's past 1 and food is on his mind. The sights and smells of the city feeding itself, food of the body and food of the soul, you might say, as a Christian throwaway is thrust into his hand, but his thoughts quickly revert to home and his wife Molly. Next he notices Stephen's half-starved sister and thinks of the father Simon and how the Catholic exhortation to increase and multiply ruins many a family. Did you ever hear such an idea? Thinks the ever-practical Bloom. Sympathy for all might be his quiet, unspoken motto as he moves along, and that all includes all living beings, I'd add, as he then buys a couple of cakes and throws the pieces to gulls scavenging about. Free to wander and contemplate the world about, canvasser for ads as he is, his thoughts are wide-ranging, profound, humorous, and sad by turns. For instance, observing an ad mounted on a rowboat rocking at anchor, he thinks this gem, good idea that, wonder if he pays rent to the corporation. How can you own water really? It's always flowing in a stream, never the same, which in the stream of life we trace, because life is a stream. But almost immediately his train of thought brings him lurching back to Blazes Boylan, and whether or not there's a chance Boylan might give Molly a dose of venereal disease. Ouch! But he dismisses the thought, and the train pulls him back to Molly with sympathy and humor. Remembering their brief conversation in the morning, he thinks, metempsychosis, she called it, till I told her about the transmigration of souls. Oh, rocks! And he smiles at that, oh rocks, and thinks appreciatively, she's right after all, only big words for ordinary things on account of the sound. She's not exactly witty, can be rude too, blurt out what I was thinking. Still, I don't know. She used to say Ben Dollard had a bass barrel-tone voice. He has legs like barrels, and you'd think he was singing into a barrel. Now, isn't that wit? They used to call him Big Ben. Not half as witty as calling him bass barrel tone. Appetite like an albatross. Get outside of a baron of beef. Powerful man he was at storing away #1 bass. Barrel of bass. See? It all works out. However, here is as good a place as any to talk about the ache Bloom's carrying around all day in his heart, and the whole business of Molly's so-called unfaithfulness or betrayal of him with this Blazes Boylan character. In my first video on the subject of Ulysses, my 10 misconceptions hindering the reading, understanding, and enjoyment of James Joyce's Ulysses, misconception number 3 was the plain and simple, Molly, Bloom's wife, is not betraying him, nor cheating upon him, nor being unfaithful to him with the dandy Blazes Boylan. The truth is, Leopold and Marion Bloom have been married 16 years. They have a daughter, Millicent, who's 15 and has moved out and into the world working as a photographer's assistant up in the town of Mullingar. They had a son named Rudy just over 10 years ago, but little Rudy died aged 11 days, and ever since things just haven't been the same. As Bloom puts it, page 168, I was happier then, or was that I? Or am I now I? 28 I was, she 23 when we left Lombard Street West. Something changed. Could never like it again after Rudy. Can't bring back time, like holding water in your hand. Would you go back to then? Just beginning then. Would you? 10 years have passed since then, and as is confirmed later in the book, Bloom and Molly haven't had sexual intercourse that entire time. He's still only 38, and she a mere 33. Is there any wonder, I ask, that she, a passionate woman still in the prime of life, hasn't taken on a lover before now? What young woman these days would wait that long? To me, the mere fact that she stuck it out this long is testament to her faithfulness in her struggling, lost husband. However, as I said in another video, Bloom, unfortunately, like so many modern males these days it seems, has lost his mojo along the way, misplaced his sense of manhood, or perhaps more accurately had it worn or beaten out of him by the blows of the modern world. His daughter now moving into young womanhood, and having lost his only son, who he could have, as he put it, raised to be independent, what is left to him? Listen to him revisiting the afternoon when he proposed to Marion, fired by the wine he's drunk over a cheese sandwich lunch. And I love this bit because later, in the last pages of the book, Molly will revisit the same memories from her perspective, with things having changed in a subtly profound way, mind you, and conclude with her famous, "Yes, I said yes, I will, yes." Anyway, Bloom reminisces, on page 175, touched, his sense moistened, remembered. Hidden under wild ferns on Howth, below us, bay sleeping, sky, no sound, the sky, the bay purple by the Lion's Head, green by Drumlick, yellow-green towards Sutton, fields of undersea, the lines faint brown in grass, buried cities. Pillowed on my coat she had her hair, earwigs in the heather, scrub my hand under her nape. You'll toss me all, oh wonder. Cool, soft, with ointments, her hand touched me, caressed, her eyes upon me did not turn away. Ravished over her I lay, full lips open, kissed her mouth. Yum! Softly she gave me in my mouth the seed cake warm and chewed. Mawkish pulp her mouth had mumbled sweet and sour with spittle. Joy! I ate it. Joy! Young life, her lips that gave me pouting. Soft, warm, sticky gum jelly lips. Flowers her eyes were. Take me, willing eyes. Pebbles fell. She lay still. A goat? No one. High on Ben Houth rhododendrons, a nanny goat walked sure-footed, dropping currants. Screened under ferns, she laughed, warm folded. Wildly I lay on her, kissed her, eyes, her lips, her stretched neck beating, women's breasts full in her blouse of nun's veiling, fat nipples upright, hot I tongued her. She kissed me, I was kissed, all yielding she tossed my hair, kissed, she kissed me. Me, and me now. Stuck, the flies buzzed. Stuck is Bloom, all right. However, wallowing in self-pity is not his way, and you could say he has plenty to be self-pitying about. I mean, a son's death, a wife's wandering, a father's suicide, utter solitude amidst the teeming city, a raft of solid, worthy ideas on a wide range of subjects, which absolutely no one is interested in or listening to. Dozens upon dozens of slights and rudenesses endured through the day. Certainly enough to be self-pitying about, but, as I said, that's just not his way. Immediately after the sticking passage read above, his eye turns to the oaken countertop, and his mind reflects on the beauty of women's curves. Which is as good a place as any to deal with one more thing with regards to Molly's decision to take on a lover. Should Bloom intervene, as he mulls over all day long? And in not doing so, is he actually encouraging Molly's so-called infidelity? And the answer to that is that Joyce held off marrying Nora Barnacle for over 20 years, only doing so in the 30s for reasons of estate. He wouldn't bow to a church's right to sanctify what he said was an unkeepable promise. That is, he reserved the right to himself to leave or wander if something went awry in his and Nora's union. But, having claimed that right for himself, he was bound to accord that very same right to Nora, wasn't he? Similarly, Bloom, as representative of the new humanity, grants Molly the ultimate token of respect and indeed reverence, her full freedom. She freely chose him some 16 years ago. If she is now choosing another, whose fault is that but his own? That he doesn't think much of Boylan is of no bearing, because the decision is Molly's to make. And he is not being usurped, as I've heard people claim. Molly is acting of her own free will, as he fully understands. And he also fully understands, or is coming to understand in the course of this fateful day, that he is the one to blame, that he has fallen short of the mark, faltered in some vital, essential way. And that is what Bloom will come to grips with, folks, as the day wears on. But let's move along. Before settling on a lunch place, he bumps into an old flame of his, a Mrs. Breen, whose crack-brained husband is running about trying to find a lawyer to help him sue the individuals responsible for a practical joke involving his unemployment benefits. Bloom's saddened to see how sunk in shabbiness she's become, but by chance learns of a Mina Purefoy in the throes of childbirth of full 3 days. You see that 3 days? And how this Mina Purefoy's later giving birth will balance Paddy Dignam's death? I mean, is it all just coincidence, her 3 days labor, Christ's 3 days burial before his resurrection, and the moon's 3-day blackness before being reborn? I don't think so. And as both Bloom and then later Molly will correctly observe, there is a new moon out. Anyway, just more death and resurrection ripples and resonances. There's more wandering, more reflections and associations. It's a wonderful episode for learning more about Bloom's formative years, his dabbling in politics, and the futility of all that clamor, passion, and violence. Here's Bloom pondering it all, page 164. His smile faded as he walked, a heavy cloud hiding the sun slowly, shadowing Trinity's surly front. Trams passed one another, ingoing, outgoing, clanging. Useless words, things go on the same, day after day. Squads of police marching out, back, trams in and out. Those two loonies mooching about. Dingnam carted off, Mina Purefoy, swollen belly on a bed, groaning to have a child tugged out of her, one born every second somewhere, other dying every second. Since I fed the birds 5 minutes, 300 kicked the bucket, other 300 born, washing the blood off, all are washed in the blood of the Lamb, bawling, "Ma!" City full passing away, other city full coming, passing away too, other coming on, passing on, houses, lines of houses, streets, miles of pavement, piled up bricks, stones, changing hand, this owner that, landlord never dies they say, other stepped into his shoes when he gets his notice to quit. They buy the place up with gold and still they have all the gold. Swindle in it somewhere, piled up in cities, worn away age after age. Pyramids in sand, built on bread and onions. Slaves, Chinese wall, Babylon. Big stones left, round towers. Rest, rubble, sprawling suburbs, Jerry built. Kirwan's mushroom houses, built of breeze, shelter for the night. And he sums up, no one is anything. Wow, no one is anything. Who would have thought? He passes both the revered Irish nationalist Charles Stewart Parnell's brother and the eminent poet A.E., who Stephen will talk to or deal with later in the next chapter, discussing the occult with a young woman. Ah, good old Bloom, listen, page 165. His eyes followed the high figure in homespun, beard and bicycle, a listening woman at his side, coming from the vegetarians, only wedgie baubles and fruit. Don't eat a beefsteak. If you do, the eyes of that cow will pursue you through all eternity. They say it's healthier. Wind and watery, though. Tried it. Keep you on the run all day. Bad as a bloater. Dreams all night. Why do they call that thing they gave me nut steak? Nut-tarians? Fruit-tarians? To give you the idea you are eating rump steak? Absurd. Salty, too. They cook in soda. Keep you sitting by the tap all night. Their stockings are loose over her ankles. I detest that. So tasteless. Those literary ethereal people they are all. Dreamy, cloudy, symbolistic. Aesthetes they are. I wouldn't be surprised if it was that kind of food you see produces the like waves of the brain, the poetical. For example, one of those policemen sweating Irish stew in their shirts, you couldn't squeeze a line of poetry out of them. Don't know what poetry is even. Must be in a certain mood. That dreamy, cloudy gull waves over the waters dull. So take that, you dreamy aesthetes, you ethereal symbolists. Anyway, hungry by now, he goes into the respectable Davy Burns establishment for a cheese sandwich and a glass of burgundy. Nosy Flynn, or as Bloom calls him, Nosy Numbskull, is in there discussing the Gold Cup. Paddy Leonard and Bantam Lyons later drop by too, and the latter is spreading the rumor that Bloom somehow has the inside track on the eventual winner. When Bloom steps out to use the washroom, both Byrne and Flynn concede that indeed Bloom does have his good points, although Flynn, filled with foolishness as he is, makes the erroneous claim that Bloom is a Mason. Be that as it may, lunch done, our hero hits the streets again and almost immediately helps a young blind piano tuner cross the street, which of course triggers thoughts on blindness and what it must be like. Remember Stephen in episode 3 closing his eyes to imagine he were blind? And that's it. On his way to the library, he spots his nemesis, Blazes Boylan, and suffering a moment of panic, ducks into the museum to avoid being seen. Hello, Pumpkin. And that's how the episode ends, safe from the eyes of the bold braggart Boylan. Well, folks, hope you've enjoyed that one, and that it has somehow opened up vistas, however tiny, into Joyce's simple-at-heart book and life in general. If you've made it this far again, I say thanks for watching the Fellows Cafe, and I'll see you next time. That's Pumpkin up there. Hiya, girl. Bye for now.